Hi, my name is Antonio, and you're listening to Catholic versus Catholic.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, if you would, please. Who you are, what you believe, and how you came to believe it.
Well, I'm a Roman Catholic, and I happen to be a sedevacantist. That is someone who believes the papacy is currently vacant, someone who believes the office of the papacy exists, unlike the Orthodox, but just holds that currently there isn't a current occupant of it. So I don't consider Francis to be the true Pope.
Okay, and how did you come to that belief? Can you talk a little bit about your childhood?
Okay, well, I'm actually Italian. I got both passports, Italian and British, and although my father was baptised in the Catholic Church when he was at age 6, I was not raised in the Catholic faith, and my father married outside of the Catholic Church and subsequently divorced. That's not a valid marriage as far as the Catholic Church is concerned, both pre-Vatican II and post-Vatican II. But so I wasn't baptised when I was a child or baby. I attended the local Church of England so-called primary school, and then I went to a secular secondary school. When I was in year 9 in secondary school, no, actually it's year 8 actually, which is, so I would have been 12, 13 at the time. We did the history about Henry VIII, about the Tudors and the Stuarts, and I learnt that Catholics had their Mass in Latin and Protestants put it into English. And I said, do they still have Mass in Latin today? He said, no, they might have it occasionally now and then, but it's in English today. And so then when I was 15, 16, I got involved with evangelical Protestantism, looking at what happens after death. And I actually watched satellite television channels, such as God TV and that sort of stuff. And amongst the satellite television channels, there was EWTN. And anyway, I still got involved with Protestantism, not realising it's Protestantism, just under the pretense it's Christianity. And I got sort of attracted to the happy, clappy music, and the electric guitars, the drums. But I saw something in EWTN, I saw something in the Catholic Church. And this is about 2005. John Paul II was not very well. He passed away, if I remember rightly, the day was the 2nd of April 2005. And for some reason, maybe because of my Italian heritage, I felt so closely connected to the Catholic Church when he died. And I watched his funeral and the election of Benedict XVI and all the television coverage leading up to his death and the whole period from when he was sort of badly ill right until after Benedict XVI was installed as supposedly the Pope. And still got involved with evangelical Protestantism and approached the local evangelical Protestant pastor to discuss the possibility of baptism. So I naturally had the Catholic belief in original sin that baptism is necessary for salvation. And funnily enough, my knowledge of that came from my RE tutor at my secondary school.
What's RE?
Religious education. It's sometimes called RS, Religious Studies. And this might surprise you, my RE teacher in year 10, he was actually Jewish. I'm not sure he was practicing, but he did talk about his Judaism as well. And that's interesting. But I naturally had the idea that born again is getting baptized. Anyway, so I approached my local evangelical Protestant pastor, when I started going to, not realising it's Protestant, about getting baptized. And he actually suggested to me that because I had so much, he wasn't anti-Catholic. He wasn't like, you'll go to hell if you join the Catholic Church. They're very well involved ecumenically in Winslow between the Anglicans, the evangelicals, and the Novus Ordo Catholics. And so he actually recommended I should speak to the local Catholic priest first to see if my baptism would be recognised or what could be done, so it wouldn't cause a problem, sort of, if he baptised me.
Oh, I see. So he understood that you were on your way into Catholicism, but he was going to perform the baptism for you. Is that what was happening?
That's correct. Potentially into my way into Catholicism. And in fact, funny enough, when I was 16, I had this idea that I'm going to become a Protestant pastor and I'm going to become a Catholic priest. Nothing about getting married, by the way. I don't know whether that applies to evangelical Protestant pastors, the various dispensations that they have in the modern church. I know if you're Anglican or Lutheran, then and you're married, you can, even though your orders are invalid according to the modern church is concerned, you're allowed to become a Catholic priest. Considering that your orders were invalid from the first place, it's kind of a bit strange. Although I have heard somewhere else that apparently they had married priests in the Catholic Church since the 1940s who were converts from Anglicanism.
Well, there still are married priests in the Catholic Church, just not in the western part of the church. They're in the eastern part of the Catholic Church, right? That's always been the case.
Of course, the same with the Orthodox as well. Yeah.
So that's a matter of discipline. That could change tomorrow. The Pope tomorrow could say priestly celibacy is out the window. I don't think he'll do it, but he could allow priests to marry tomorrow in the West if he wanted to.
Could do, yeah. I mean, I think his priority at the moment is trying to push through women deacons, and then maybe he might get married priests as a norm in the Western Church before he gets women priests, possibly. But you already have, in the modern Novus Ordo Church, married deacons. So, naturally the next thing is women deacons.
Yeah, historically there were deaconesses. I don't know what the role was exactly of the deaconess, but there is a historical precedent for that in the Catholic Church.
Supposedly, although I hear that apparently the purpose of them was to assist in baptisms in the early church because of reasons of modesty for women baptisms.
Yeah. So where did you go from there? Did that Protestant minister administer a baptism to you?
He actually advised me to speak to my local Catholic Novus Ordo priest. And I eventually saw him and we sat down and I told him I might become Catholic at a later date, and he wasn't interested in me becoming Catholic.
No?
He was just disinterested and but he said, yes, if you get baptised by this evangelical Protestant pastor, then it'll be recognised in the Catholic Church. And so I went ahead and I got, on the 19th of March 2006, at the age of 17, I was baptised, what I later found out to be invalidly, by an evangelical Protestant pastor by full immersion. Evangelical Protestants, when I looked at it a few years later in detail, don't actually believe that baptism is necessary for the remission of original sin. They believe that it's basically symbolic and the thing the Baptists say out of obedience to our Lord's command. But I think I might have been a bit more sceptical about it if they told me from the outset it was Protestant.
Right. So what happened after that ostensible baptism?
Well, 2 days later after my baptism, I went to the nearby town of Aylesbury in Buckinghamshire, where I was studying at the college, a BTEC IT course. And I knew this local Baptist preacher who I'd met previously, and I showed him photographs of my baptism. And I told him it took so long because I had to make sure the baptism would be recognised in the Catholic Church. And then that's when my relationship with him changed completely. He told me all sorts of stuff. Catholics worship Mary, Our Lady. The Eucharist is blasphemy. Christ died once for sin. He told me that he believes John Paul II was in hell.
Did he scare you away from the Catholic Church?
I was a bit scared, I have to say, but I went home that day and I first called up my local Catholic Novus Ordo priest that advised me to get an evangelical Protestant baptism. And I told him what the Baptist preacher has told to me. And he said, well, what he says is complete nonsense. The best advice I can give you is to stay away from him. And I actually followed that advice. So I actually ran the Anglican vicar up because I knew he would sort of be halfway between the evangelicals and the Catholics. And he told me there were some strange Baptist churches here and there. He was generally quite helpful. He was sort of more or less neutral. But and then I also finally spoke to my local evangelical Protestant pastor who did the baptism. And he suggested that I'd come around for a chat with him, which I did. That's maybe a month or two later. And he told me about how it went from the early church in Jerusalem, and you had the Orthodox and the Catholic, and then you had the Martin Luther, and you had the Protestants, and how it all branched off from there. And he said that while they don't believe in the thing that Catholics go to hell, they do agree with some of what this Baptist preacher was saying. And he advised that I'll have to either go one, I can't be both, I'll have to go one way or the other eventually. And I continued to research this issue for many, many months. In fact, I put more effort into this than my BTEC course at Aylesbury College. because it's eternal salvation. And I came across various things such as in the Bible it says, "This is my body, this is my blood, not this represents my body." St. Luke 1:28 says, "Hail thou that art highly favoured, the Lord is with thee, blessed art thou amongst women." But the penny dropped when I came across on YouTube this video by the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America called Understanding the Roman Catholic Church. They interviewed Roman Catholics in St. Peter's Square, and they asked them why they're Catholic. And there's this one Catholic bishop who said why. He said, "I firmly believe that when Jesus said, 'Thou art Peter, and upon this rock,' he meant it, and this is the rock of Peter." And the Catholic Church has its continuity all the way back to the time of Christ. And of course, then I researched that. Matthew 16:18, "Thou art Peter, and upon this rock I'll build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. I'll give unto thee the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatsoever thou shalt loose on earth shall be loosed also in heaven, and whatsoever thou shalt bind on earth shall be bound also in heaven." Anyway, so that was automatically justified anything and everything. I already knew from what I saw in the media around the time of the death of John Paul II and election of Benedict XVI that the Pope was a successor of St. Peter. And here I've got our Lord Jesus Christ establishing the papacy upon St. Peter in the Bible. So then I decided, right, I'm going to move out this evangelical thing and just be Catholic. I stopped getting involved with that, and I just went to the Sunday morning mass at the Catholic Church. Did that for a few months until the 14th of January 2007. I was formally received into the modern Catholic Church.
Did you do RCIA?
No, I didn't. Our parish was so small, I just had a few conversations with the priest, and he didn't give me much instruction. He gave me a couple of books to read, and that was it.
Do you remember which books?
I remember one of them, How to Survive Being Married to a Catholic. And it had a lot of illustrations, a lot of humorous illustrations. In fact, 6 months ago, I bought myself a couple of those books off eBay for a few pounds just to look at the funny illustrations. I mean, I'm going through them with a pen and I'm crossing things out like Vatican II and all this sort of stuff, and looking for heresies in them now. But
can you think of an example?
Actually, I can. Yeah. The thing it says, it's okay to attend a Protestant service.
Okay.
That's not okay in tradition. You can attend it for a wedding or funeral, but you can't be involved. You can't say amen to any of the prayers. You can't sing any of the hymns, which you would, even the ones you might sing in the Catholic Church. In fact, to do that would be called communicatio sacris before Vatican II. And it'd be a mortal sin. That's the tradition of it. I mean, obviously what happens nowadays is a different thing.
So where did you go from there? You've received this lackluster accompaniment into the church. Did you get your sacraments?
Yes, he was keen to sort of to receive me into the church and confirm me there and then on the same day, but I said I'd rather be confirmed by the bishop.
Of course.
I think it's the 26th of June 2008, I was then confirmed by the Novus Ordo Bishop of Northampton in the new rite.
Do you remember his name?
Peter Doyle. Well, Bishop Peter Doyle, but to me, he's Father Peter Doyle, because he's only just a priest. I actually looked him up. He was ordained a priest 10 days before the new 1968 Roman Pontifical came into force. So he's just about a priest, but he's a Novus Ordo bishop. He was the first bishop appointed for England and Wales by Benedict XVI in 2005. And I think he's about 72 now, and when he's 75, according to the new 1983 Code of Canon Law, he has to tender his resignation to the supposed Pope. So, a few years' time, there's going to be a new Novus Ordo Bishop of Northampton.
So where did you go from there after the confirmation?
Well, I always knew about the Latin Mass from what I learned at school, and after I was received into the modern church, I wanted to go to a Latin Mass somewhere. But I couldn't get there because of problems with transport. I lived in the town of Winslow in rural North Buckinghamshire. Very few buses, no train station, and I wouldn't be able to get there and back to a Latin Mass on Sunday or any other day, really. So in 2009, I got myself a 125cc scooter, motorbike, and then I was able to go to Latin Mass at Flitwick. And I went there a few times, and The sister of who would later become my godmother told me about the Chartres pilgrimage in France. It's a 3-day pilgrimage walking over the Pentecost weekend, walking from Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris to Notre Dame Cathedral in Chartres. Probably just over 100 kilometres. They have traditional mass every day and high mass, sung mass, and
outdoors?
It was outdoors, yeah. Except when you get to Chartres, the mass is in Chartres Cathedral.
So you came back exhilarated and on fire for the old mass?
Yeah, for the Jewishness movement. And I realised, I remember saying to the lady who later became my godmother on the train who I came back with, it feels like Anglicanism in the new mass does, after I come back. And when I came back, I tried not to go to the new mass. Before, I would go every few Sundays, maybe twice a month, to the old mass, because it'd be 25 miles from my home. But when I came back, I went 25 miles there, 25 miles back every Sunday to go to the old mass. And then I started doing research on everything that's happened since Vatican II, and I started to doubt the validity of my Novus Ordo confirmation. Because the oil they use in confirmation nowadays, there's no requirement that chrism be olive oil and balsam. It can be any vegetable oil and any spice, and often like cheaper sunflower oils are used, or other vegetable oils for reasons of cost. And that basically is invalid matter. And also the words have changed. And I sign with the sign of the cross and confirm with the chrism of salvation in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Ghost. That's the old one. But the new one is N, be sealed with the gift of the Holy Spirit. So I started to have doubts about my Novus Ordo confirmation, and I was looking at getting myself conditionally confirmed in the old rite, in the traditional rite. And I first contacted the Latin Mass Society about that. Now, because they're sort of in with the modern hierarchy and they use Westminster auxiliary bishops, and I'd already been confirmed in the new rite, that they weren't able to do anything. So then the man who later became my godfather, who I met at Flitwick, he advised me to go to the SSPX. That is the Society of St. Pius X. It's the organisation which Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre founded. And I started to go to the SSPX here and there. I went to them once in Oxford, say hello to them, and ask about confirmation. And I went on the Walsingham pilgrimage in 2009 in September. And then just after the Walsingham pilgrimage, I came back and I realised my baptism was invalid. And so I got a note from my pastor to say he had no intention of remitting original sin when he baptised me, that evangelical pastor. Showed it to a Fraternity St. Peter priest who was involved with the Latin Mass at Flitwick, and he said it seems doubtful. Looked into it, he found it invalid. And so he arranged for the local diocesan priest at Flitwick to baptise me unconditionally, with the full rite, with exorcisms and everything. And it was the local diocesan priest as opposed to the Fraternity St. Peter priest, because the local diocesan priest was saying the old mass there instead. The local diocesan priest of Flitwick, who's now deceased, Dennis McSweeney is his name, he likes the old mass and he says it. He used to say it quite often. So he was saying the mass that week, so he baptised me in the old rite, and I've sent you the video to that. It's on YouTube.
You mentioned another society, something about St. Peter. What was the name of that organization?
It's called the Priestly Fraternity of St. Peter, or the FSSP.
Ah, okay, they're in full communion with the Pope, right?
Yeah, it depends what you mean by full communion. The thing is, the term fullness, full communion, is very much a Vatican II thing. I mean, before Vatican II, you're either in communion or you weren't. There's no such thing as partial or full communion. It's to do with ecclesiology. I mean, especially with the Vatican II teaches the Church of Christ subsists in the Catholic Church, whereas before Vatican II it was Church of Christ is the Catholic Church. But this new thing, I mean, I think it's Novus Ordo Cardinal, more recently, Coco Paul Mario, has been saying about how we should reflect on the possibility of partially valid sacraments. And, that could either relate to Anglican orders, which Pope Leo XIII declared to be absolutely null and utterly void in Apostolic Curia in 1896, infallibly, but also marriage, that the idea you have a partially valid marriage where It's either on or it's off. You don't have partialness of a sacrament traditionally. The whole fullness stroke partialness is just so Vatican II. And I think this Amoris Laetitia, and everything that's going on with Francis, it's just an extension of Vatican II. He was ordained in 1969. Although he's born in 1930s, he's known nothing but Vatican II.
There may be a way for you to reconcile Vatican II with what you consider to be the pre-Vatican II Church. I would hope that you could come to understand that, because there are many subtle teachings even in the Bible that your average layman, if he just picks up the Bible and reads it, he will get confused and he might be tempted to abandon Jesus Christ. Do you not agree?
Well, Bishop Williamson said that tradition and the Second Vatican Council mix like oil and water. Although he's not a sedevacantist, I think he's completely right.
He's SSPX?
Well, yeah, he's been kicked out of the SSPX now, but he's SSPX resistance. He was one of the 4 bishops consecrated by Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre. I know him very well. I've met him. I've served his mass many times. I even sent you a photograph of me serving his mass in the Baptist Church Hall, which was just a coincidence because we're due to say mass in Elsfield's Library Hall. But the person with the keys didn't turn up, so one of our lay lady ran down the street, and the Baptist lent us their hall for half an hour, and we ended up saying mass in the Baptist Church Hall, which I thought was strange, but I will never forget that mass. They can't have been strict Baptists, or if they were, then whoever they gave permission from them probably didn't know.
So where did you go from there? Where are we now in your chronology? Can you just catch us up?
So I got the SSP priest decided it was completely invalid, and I was baptised unconditionally on the 4th of October 2009 in the traditional rite. And the video I've sent you, it's on YouTube. And because my baptism was completely, absolutely, and utterly void, that also necessarily rendered my confirmation invalid as well. And so I could have, at that point, have gone to the Latin Mass Society and had them confirm me by an auxiliary bishop of Westminster. But I thought, well, is he only going to intend to do what the modern church is going to do, and is the chrism really right? So I decided to go to the SSPX anyway to get confirmed. And I was, funnily enough, going to be confirmed by Bishop Williamson, who was at that time living in the UK. He wasn't yet kicked out of the SSPX, but he was expelled from Argentina because of certain statements he made on Swedish television. I had to get the approval of Father Paul Morgan, who was the then District Superior of Great Britain. So I wrote him a letter asking for his approval at one point, and it was just about to be published that Bishop Tissia de Mullery was going to do a confirmations tour as another SSPX bishop, and so he wrote back saying it's certainly possible, but I'd rather you be confirmed by Bishop Tissia de Mullery when he does his official confirmation tour.
I just interviewed Stephen Heiner, and I believe his claim to fame is that he interviewed that very bishop.
Yes, I believe he interviewed actually both Bishop Williamson and Bishop Tissia de Mullery as well.
Those were both SSPX at the time?
Yes, and he also interviewed Father Paul Morgan as well.
The sedevacantist / SSPX, is it a small world?
Kind of. I mean, there are some overlap. I mean, the SSPX is not sedevacantist per se, but from the early days, Father Anti-Shikada, Bishop Sanborn, then Father Sanborn, Father Dolan, now Bishop Dolan. There are various priests in the SSPX who were sedevacantists. The SSPX started in the 1970s. Archbishop Lefebvre was always between two things. Like, if you watch Father Shikada's videos on YouTube, Reverend Anti-Shikada, I mean, Father Shikada was there firsthand. He knows things a bit better than I do. Out of the SSPX, you had those who sort of take the sedevacantist position, and you also had then those in 1988 who left to found the Fraternity of St. Peter. And again, there's probably a lot of people in the SSPX who go to the SSPX and go to the SSPX resistance who are sedevacantists. Some of them may sort of know it themselves, they're sedevacantists, but be secret about it. Some of them are unsure whether they're sedevacantists. I mean, for myself, I don't know when I actually became a sedevacantist. I know I was definitely a sedevacantist in 2013 when Bergoglio came along. But I had doubts about Benedict XVI between 2010 and 2013 about whether he was Pope.
Who is the last pope that you didn't have doubts about? Pius XII?
Correct, yeah, Pius XII.
What would it take for someone to sit down with you and show you that Pope Pius XII was either a heretic or just simply was not a valid pope? How much would it take?
Well, I'd have to see the evidence. I mean, there is no evidence.
How would you characterize the mental health of someone that made that claim?
I mean, I really don't know at this stage. I would have to play it by ear. But, I mean, I haven't come across a sedevacantist who doesn't believe Pius XII isn't the Pope, or wasn't the Pope even. So he's not the Pope now because he's dead.
But what I'm driving at here is that you have not thoroughly investigated all of the popes from St. Peter up until Pius XII in order to come to the firm conviction that they were all fully Catholic and that they were not professing heresies and this sort of thing. You haven't done that level of research, correct?
Well, I mean, it's 260 popes from St. Peter to Pius XII. That takes me awful long time.
Yeah, it seems like a rash judgment to say, well, look, there hasn't been a pope in my lifetime, but I'm going to just blindly put my faith in the 260 popes that came before I was even born, that they were all free from any heretical statements or suspicious disciplines that they imposed on their faithful. It just seems very naive and very rash judgment. Do you understand my perspective?
Well, I mean, the church, is always for everywhere for all time. And, I mean, you don't have to be around to know what the popes taught. You got the documents from them. I mean, there is consistency. A lot of people have researched it. And I've looked at that research myself, verified it before I became a sedevacantist. And in fact, the reason I'm a sedevacantist is not so much that I don't think Francis is Pope, but I just can't see how he can be Pope. It's quite clear. I mean, I know, for example, there's another matter. I know in Bologna, I've heard this from Father Shikada, actually on a show called Francis Watch, which is on Stephen Heiner's True Restoration thing. Apparently, there's this University of Bologna in Italy. There's this theological faculty which they research everything to do with Vatican II, disciplinary, etc., pre and post Vatican II. And I think they have noticed all their priests there, and I think what they conclude is that Vatican II is rupture. And I mean, I don't rely on them like that, but I remember Father Shikada was saying that since Francis came along, they've got more funding in euros from the European Union because he's so radical. I believe it's been planned long in advance, and the Freemasons and the communists and the enemies of our Lord Jesus Christ have, got inside the church and done it from the inside with Vatican II. And I'm sure you've seen papal impostures and aware of that. I mean, that is pretty damning evidence.
I haven't watched it yet. I interviewed the documentary maker, Thomas. I have no doubt that there's infiltration and that Paul VI famously said, the smoke of Satan has entered the Catholic Church. I think it's evident for all to see. But I trust in God and in God alone. And I think, like you said, there's a plan from all eternity, and nothing happens that isn't intended for our greater good. All circumstances are optimized by God for each and every single individual. Don't you agree?
Well, yeah, I mean, sometimes God allows evil to bring about a greater good. I'll tell you one thing that Vatican II does teach is primacy of individual conscience. And the thing is, if Vatican II teaches primacy of conscience, that if someone follows the conscience, they go to heaven, and I'm truly following my conscience being a sedevacantist. If I'm wrong, and the Vatican II Church is right, then I'm saved. Whereas on the other hand, if I was in the Vatican II Church, following my conscience for being in the Vatican II Church, and I'm wrong, then I'm damned. So either way, by being sedevacantist on simply a logical point of view, it makes sense for me. But I mean, I'm not sedevacantist because of that reason. I'm sedevacantist because I honestly believe it is the truth, and sometimes the truth is inconvenient.
Yeah. For sure. This whole I do want to address what you said about conscience. That's a very touchy topic, and it certainly has not been dogmatically defined pre or post 1958. So I think we should be careful about characterizing the Vatican II Church as having embraced the conscience loophole. that's something that a lot of people like to toy with, and theologians are exploring a lot of very subtle applications of the nuanced relationship between the objective reality of Christ and his church and the sacraments and our consciences. But the church teaches me that it's not merely a question of conscience, that there is an objective necessity for baptism, for all the sacraments, to be within the Catholic Church to be saved. There is no salvation outside of the Catholic Church. My Catholic Church teaches me that, and your sedevacantist point of view makes the same claim, right? So that we're in the same boat theologically there, despite the fact that there are a lot of flaky people trying to look to conscience as a loophole.
I resisted being sedevacantist for quite a number of years, or at least formally coming out as sedevacantist. When Benedict XVI came to England, he called Rome Williams the, quote, Archbishop of Canterbury. And Pope Leo XIII decreed infallibly in 1896 in the Apostolic Curia that Anglican orders are and always have been absolutely null and utterly void. And not only that, but he actually went as far as to say, Your Grace, the Archbishop of Canterbury. And Your Grace is a title used for archbishops, and an archbishop has jurisdiction. I couldn't believe that.
I think that's just diplomacy, common courtesy, and I'm no expert on these social graces whatsoever. I'm not. But I know that if you look at the life of Jesus, he was turning heads with the company he kept.
I mean, the thing is, he didn't have to say His Grace the Archbishop of Canterbury. He could have said the Anglican Archbishop of Canterbury, and that would have excused him, very simply. But I mean, he'd done worse things than that. He went to this interreligious prayer meeting at Assisi and praying inside a mosque, which, is communicatio sacris. I mean, doing it in a Protestant church is bad enough, but doing it in a mosque, that's... And the supposed vicar of Christ upon earth.
But what do you say about Jesus Christ ostensibly breaking the Sabbath? What do you say? Because the Pharisees didn't like it too much, did they?
Well...
Do you understand why, from my perspective, you splinter groups look like a bunch of Pharisaical maniacs?
Well, I'm not sure I do exactly, but I mean, funny enough you say that. I mean, one thing that Bergoglio's certainly done, Benedict XVI might have done it as well, is things like Seder meals, with Jewish things. When our Lord Jesus Christ died on the cross, that was the end of the Old Covenant and the beginning of the New Covenant. And the Old Covenant became invalid. But the one church tends to pretend that the Old Covenant is still valid.
No, not at all. That's not what my church teaches. But I think you'll remember when St. Paul corrected St. Peter because he was torn by the sort of Judaizers, right? So I think there's a precedent where popes can struggle with the reality of their social context, and they can fail in a certain way that appears to be human respect, and they're subject to correction by the church. Do you acknowledge that much?
Well, I mean, with Bergoglio, I mean, he was barred from election from the very beginning. I mean, he was clearly a heretic before he was elected. And so by the papal bull Cum Ex Apostolis Officio from Pope Paul IV, he can't have been Pope in the first place. But I mean, it's impossible that someone who's the head of the Catholic Church would necessarily have to be a member of the Catholic Church.
I still have yet to look into this because I just frankly have not taken it seriously enough to look into it too deeply. But as I said to my previous sedevacantist guest, Stephen Heiner, I can well imagine a scenario where God would permit his church to have a heretical pope, at least a material heretic, who is nonetheless prevented from teaching error concerning faith and morals. I don't see any theoretical objection to that. Now, it might be the case that it is in fact impossible and that God forbids the head to be heretical. But there's more to being a heretic than just teaching heresy. It has to do with a certain persistence and a resistance to correction, right? Which implies that the church can correct the Pope.
I don't believe that. I mean, because if he's the Pope, he could declare it invalid.
It's basically his word against the church and his word sticks, right?
Yes, that'd be the problem with that. I mean, it has been addressed on Tradcast by Novus Ordo Watch. They've talked about this situation.
Yeah, they may have talked about it, but they don't have God's omniscience, right? That's the difference. The reason I'm comfortable in what you consider a fake church is because I believe in the church's authority, the church's infallibility, and the church's indefectibility. And I also believe that the church can be recognized by the 4 marks. She is one, holy, Catholic, and apostolic. And I don't see how the sedevacantists are able, even in theory, to maintain the 4 marks or the 3 attributes. Could you talk a little bit about those in detail?
Well, it's to be one church, to be universal, the same for always, for all time, has to be holy. I mean, John Paul II kissing the Quran, praising the voodoo religion, directly against the first commandment. I am the Lord thy God, thou shalt have no strange gods before me. Catholic, universal, it's not been taught as Catholic for universal for all time, as I said. And the lack of holy orders, they've changed the sacramental form for episcopal consecration, invalidating holy orders. The post-Vatican II church, to me, just doesn't have the 4 marks either.
What would you consider invalid about the consecration of bishops in the changed consecration?
Well, what constituted the actual sacramental form for episcopal consecration and priestly ordination was somewhat unclear between theologians until Pope Pius XII in 1947 in Sacramentum Ordinis. He defined infallibly what constitutes the essential form of priestly ordination and episcopal consecration, etc. And you have to have 2 things. You have to have the grace of the Holy Ghost being referred to in the form, and the power of order being conferred. The new rite of episcopal consecration doesn't specify the power of order being conferred.
Is there a quick and easy way for me to verify? Is there a document that I can go to?
It's a revised Roman Pontifical of 1968.
Okay, that's a document I could find online, possibly?
Well, I mean, you might be able to find some of it online, possibly, but yeah, I mean, you don't necessarily need to have a bound book because you're not going to be performing ceremonies.
Unless I decide to make myself a bishop and just start my own church.
Well, how are you going to make yourself a bishop?
I'm just being completely silly. Talk me through the strange understanding that you must have of this huge church suddenly disappearing in one spot and appearing in much smaller numbers in another spot. Please talk me through that.
Well, Bishop Sanborn says that the Novus Ordo Church has the corpse of the Catholic Church, as in like Frankenstein. That's what the analogy he makes.
Yeah, I want you to talk me through that imagery, because the real church is fully continuous from your point of view, and yet there's this corpse that's been left behind. So was that an instantaneous change or a gradual change? Are there still people in the corpse that are finding their way into the living body of Jesus Christ?
Well, I think what we're going through now is a bit of a repeat like the Great Western Schism. We had several different lineages. I mean, there are other claimants like supposedly Pope Michael in America. I think we are going through a sort of repeat of the Great Western Schism, but slightly different numbers, to what it was before.
No, but if you have 1 billion adherents to a religion, and then suddenly 99.9998% of adherents to that true religion suddenly find themselves members of a false religion, how do you explain that?
Well, I mean, if there was a genuine mistake, like something that happened in the Great Western Schism, I mean, I don't think, such people would be damned. I mean, there are obviously all these liberals and, which don't believe in church teaching pre or post, or for contraception, artificial birth control. Well, yeah, they're not Catholic. They weren't Catholic beforehand. They're not part of the church. They've gone out with the church.
But it seems to me that Satan can fool conservatives just as much as he can fool liberals, no? Is there not a danger there?
I don't think there is too much of a danger, really, because before Vatican II, all the teaching was very clear, concise, to the point, and not a word was wasted. Whereas post Vatican II, you look at everything; it's ambiguous. There's, you look at these press conferences at the Vatican about Amoris Laetitia and allowing communion for. And, they start out, and at the end of the conference, the journalists don't know anything more than they knew beforehand.
Yeah. What are the telltale signs of a genuine wolf in sheep's clothing? Have you met one?
Actually, I have. I've been 10 feet away from one. Father Joseph Ratzinger. Yeah. I mean, I was kind of excited, even though I thought he may not be Pope, but he may be Pope.
What were the indications in your mind that gave it away that he is, in fact, a wolf in sheep's clothing?
Well, at first, I had this belief that Benedict XVI may be Pope, but why is he doing all these silly things, And, is he somewhat confused? I mean, Bishop Williamson, thought he was Pope, and, in fact, Bishop Williamson thinks that his abdication may have been on pressure. He may have been invalid. And Bishop Williamson thinks he's got that Benedict XVI has a problem with his mind for some time. And I think that's probably true, actually.
You think he might have mental illness of some sort?
I don't think it's so much mental illness. I think it's the philosophy. I think he's probably got the philosophy of Immanuel Kant, which denies objective reality.
I don't think so. If you read the Regensburg Address, that infamous Regensburg Address in Germany, it was precisely by attacking Immanuel Kant and associating that way of thinking with Protestantism and with Islam. That's what he said in Regensburg. So I don't see how he would fall into that same trap when he's pointing it out as a very dangerous modern trap of the mind.
When he went to seminary, he might have had half modernist professors and half good professors. So he's got this idea in his mind that it really doesn't matter, sort of. So he can say whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think your speculation is pretty wild. I'd need to have some concrete evidence that Pope Benedict XVI was some sort of transcendentalist. I don't believe that. I would need some concrete evidence, and I haven't seen any. I've seen evidence to the contrary. He's talked against transcendentalism. What is this organization that seems to be a very ill repute, Brother Diamond and the Holy Family Monastery or something like that in the United States? Are you aware of them?
Yes, I am. Most Holy Family Monastery they also go by.
And do you know if they are in fact controversial?
Yes, they are controversial, generally speaking. When I first came from the Novus Ordo to a tradition, I didn't like New Mass. I came along the videos ago. The New Mass is a false mass and an abomination. It went on and on, a big rant about it. And I did research within time what they said, and I think it's true. But I can see the way they say it. Sometimes it does come across a bit strong. But if I try not to be too strong to people I've met before, and which are not traditional Catholics, etc. But I mean, the truth is the truth, and then excludes error. 2 and 2 are 4. They're not 5. They're not 4.0001.
I agree fully. I completely agree with that statement.
In a way, I mean, there's a lot. I see in France there's a lot of hypocrisy. I mean, he said, like, who am I to judge in relation to homosexuals potentially? And then he said, like, Donald Trump is not a true Christian at another point.
Well, he said then it was a conditional statement. He said one who's only interested in building walls and not bridges is not a true Christian. But he didn't say that Donald Trump is only interested in building walls, but he was warning Trump that bridges need to be built and not just walls. So you see, it's a conditional thing. The same thing with who am I to judge? That was wildly misinterpreted by every enemy of Francis. I never had a problem with it because what he said was maybe subtle and nuanced, but it wasn't anti-Catholic and it wasn't pro-sin, pro-active, unrepentant homosexuality. All it was a statement about if someone is orthodox and they also are a sinner engaging in sin, who am I to judge? Meaning, maybe they're struggling, maybe they're not unrepentant.
I mean, for the Vicar of Christ to say, "Who am I to judge?" I mean, in the old rite of episcopal consecration, it says it is a bishop's duty to pass judgment, to interpret, to bless, to ordain, to baptize, confirm, etc.
Yeah, well, he has passed judgment on homosexual unions. He said that it's gravely disordered, right? So he has passed judgment. He's not afraid to pass judgment, but he's also not afraid to pastorally care for his flock of sinners by saying, look, if your intention is good and you want to strive to follow Jesus Christ, that's the most important thing. And if you falling is not what defines you. What defines you is getting up and turning to Jesus Christ, repenting, going to confession, and availing yourself of prayer and the sacraments. So there's a pastoral care that he has, which is maybe too soft and gentle for the rad trads. But for me, I find that it's appropriate and it's very Christian and it's Catholic.
I think he does use the media, sometimes to convey it, and you make use of the ambiguity and all this stuff. I mean, another thing he said is Catholics shouldn't breed like rabbits. Well, what's that could be interpreted as by the mass? It's okay to use artificial contraception, or it should,
But he's also on the record said that contraception is grave sin. So, the thing is that he has recently stated that he's very willing to risk being misinterpreted. I don't know if you saw the statement by him, but he said he takes the risk of talking off the cuff with people, like, for example, on his in-flight interviews. He's willing to take that risk. And I personally agree with him. I think it's worth the risk because it's getting attention. It's bringing people closer to Jesus Christ. It's drawing people into the Catholic Church. I'm not a fan of ambiguity for ambiguity's sake, but the risk he takes by speaking off the cuff and by maybe having a bit of irony where he knows where he stands with God, and if the radical right wing doesn't have enough charity to give him the benefit of the doubt, that's their problem. I can understand that perspective because he has a lot on his shoulders. He's the vicar of Jesus Christ. And I trust him. I don't trust him as a man, but I trust his office, that he is protected from teaching error concerning faith and morals, and that there are graces and charisms that come with that office. The man himself, sinner and unworthy though he is, I think he is being flooded with graces, and to the extent that he corresponds with them, so much the better.
Yeah, and I think, the people should build bridges, not walls. Well, the Vatican is surrounded by walls. What's he going to do, knock them down? I hope not, because that's historical. But the other thing that he said, that before Brexit, he said the UK should remain in the European Union to help other countries. Well, if the European Union is so good, why isn't the Vatican a member?
Yeah, he's entitled to his opinion about politics. I frankly could care less. But that's not the point. The point is his job is to shepherd souls into the church and ultimately into heaven, right? And I don't think that there's a dogmatic statement about Brexit.
Does he actually believe in heaven? I think I read something the other day. It said he's got the idea of heaven, hell, purgatory is sort of out the window, and he believes in something called either the Beatitudes. If you're good or if you're bad, you just get annihilated. Well,
that's clearly not Catholic. If he said that, I'd be very interested to have some sort of documentation on that one. The enemies of Christ and the enemies of the Pope are capable of vicious, hateful lies. So I don't believe everything that I hear about Donald Trump, and I don't believe everything I hear about the Pope, even though I don't trust Donald Trump and I don't trust the Pope as a man. But I don't believe every slur and slander that comes my way. I would need documented proof. And if there's an ambiguous statement in writing, I'd still want to give the benefit of the doubt. So that's my position. I understand that your position is quite different, though. But at the end of my interviews, I always ask my guests to speak directly to the audience, just to give a little message of hope. So what would you say to anyone that might be listening now?
Well, I would say, pray the rosary, not the luminous mysteries. You can pray it on your fingers if you don't have a rosary. Of course, if you've got a rosary, it's better, but it's the prayers that count. And I would wear the brown scapular as well, of Our Lady of Mount Carmel, and the miraculous medal. And for those who are not yet baptised, or wear the green scapular for conversion. It will lead you towards the Catholic Church.
If you like your worldview, if you think it's swell, if you got some questions, ask me and I'll tell. All you got to do is ask. All you got to do is